You spend a lifetime building a home, believing love and loyalty are enough to keep the walls standing. But what do you do when your own daughter turns those walls into a prison and every memory becomes a weapon? The night I signed the house over to Emily, I thought I was passing on a legacy. I never imagined I was signing away my peace, my future, my very sense of self. If you've ever wondered how it feels to be betrayed by the one person you trusted most, stay with me. Because sometimes, losing everything you thought mattered is the only way to find out who you truly are. The old rocker, a legacy from my grandfather, served as my evening sentinel. From the porch, I'd watch fireflies ignite the lawn with their ephemeral signals. The air, heavy with honeysuckle and the scent of turned earth, conjured summer memories, though tainted now by the bitter tang of betrayal and a persistent ache in my chest. The swing set, a motionless frame in the yard, held only the ghost of Emily's joyous peals. I could almost hear her childish delight as she pursued butterflies, net in hand, a miniature cyclone of scraped knees and inexhaustible spirit. The aroma of stale bubblegum, perpetually clinging to her pigtails, seemed to drift on the breeze. Sunlight, diluted by the dust-laden air within, highlighted threadbare patches on the living room rug, battlegrounds for Emily's elaborate blanket forts. I'd play along, a clumsy dragon or a captive prince, gladly immersed in her boundless creativity. Each room resonated with echoes of a life lived within these walls. The kitchen, scene of early baking lessons, where her tiny hands wrestled with stubborn eggshells. The hallway, a gallery of childlike crayon drawings, stick figures inhabiting lopsided dwellings. The attic, a repository of forgotten toys and dusty relics, a testament to time's relentless march. I recalled signing the house over, Emily, vibrant and newly married to David, buzzed with plans, dreams of a family to fill the rooms with laughter as she had. It seemed a natural course, a father's offering, a lineage continued. The lawyer's drone about paperwork, ownership transfer, the finality of the act, faded as I fixated on Emily's hopeful, sparkling eyes. "Are you certain, Arthur?" he had probed, peering over his glasses. "Irreversible once done." "Of course," I'd affirmed, "it's for Emily." Now the memory was a barb in my throat, the rocker's rhythmic creak, a counterpoint to the storm inside my mind, back and forth, a slow waltz of regret and resignation. I strained to recapture the pride of that day, the satisfaction of securing my daughter's future. Only the sting of betrayal remained, the hollowness in my accounts, a crushing weight of love misused. I had envisioned myself here, old and content, ringed by family, watching grandchildren frolic where Emily had played. I'd imagined spinning tales on this porch, the rocker's song a comforting rhythm beneath their laughter, a life unrealized, a stolen future. The sinking sun splashed the sky in shades of flame. The fireflies intensified their dance, pinpricks of light against the encroaching dark. I lingered on the porch, the rocker my only confidant, watching shadows stretch across the lawn. I was a spectre, a silent witness to a life denied. The choice was made, the house sold, the funds transfer tomorrow. Then oblivion, a phantom fading into the dusk, leaving echoes of what had been. Let them discover the truth later. Let them return to find nothing. Let them taste even a sliver of the pain they left me with. But I refused to witness it. Peace of mind, however fleeting, was all that I possessed. The rocker emitted a long groan beneath me, a somber sigh reflecting the ache in my soul. Time to retreat indoors. Time to assemble the scant possessions I would carry. Time to bid farewell to the memories clinging to these walls. Time to abandon the old rocker. The pale blue envelope arrived with its usual grim punctuality. Another month, another bank statement. Usually, it languished unopened on the hall table, a delayed reckoning I wasn't eager to face. But today, a peculiar urgency gripped me, a stark contrast to the placid resignation I'd felt since deciding to move. Perhaps it was the deceptive tranquility before the storm, I mused. I ripped the envelope, the paper yielding with a whisper. The statement unfurled. I glanced at the starting balance, then let my gaze slide down the columns of figures, a flurry of debits, each incrementally larger than the last. Bill payments, I initially assumed, then the dates registered. Too frequent, too clustered, the amounts too exorbitant. A knot formed in my stomach. I snatched my reading glasses from the nearby table and focused on the ledger. The numbers swam, a chaotic blur refusing to resolve. A mistake, surely. Banks were prone to errors, weren't they? But with each scrutiny, the truth solidified, stark and undeniable. The withdrawals were real, significant, and recent. Each transaction meticulously noted: ATM dispersals, digital transfers, a cashier's check made out to David. A glacial dread permeated my being, a feeling that transcended mere surprise. This was treachery, pure and simple. Emily, my own flesh and blood, and her spouse, systematically plundering my nest egg. The fortune I'd meticulously amassed over a lifetime of toil, the legacy I had earmarked for her future. My chest constricted. A strange pressure bloomed behind my eyes, a fierce heat threatening to spill over. Tears of anger, of anguish, of utter disbelief. How could she? How could they perpetrate such a deed? I slumped into the porch swing, its rhythmic squeak a jeering soundtrack to my inner chaos. The setting sun painted elongated, grotesque shadows across the manicured lawn, distorting familiar shapes into monstrous parodies. The house seemed to observe me, its windows like vacant sockets mirroring my disoriented gaze. I recalled Emily as a child, her bright eyes sparkling with unadulterated joy. Countless evenings spent lost in bedtime stories, guiding her first bicycle ride, wrestling with fractions and essays, the sacrifices I embraced so that she might have a boundless future. And now, this act of avarice, I attempted to reconcile the image of the adoring daughter with the remorseless schemer who had emptied my accounts. An impossible feat. The two personas remained stubbornly distinct, leaving me marooned in a desolate wasteland of heartbreak and disillusion. Was there a motive, a desperate plight that compelled them to such drastic measures, or was it simply unrestrained covetousness, a cruel disregard for my well-being? The questions spiraled within my mind, unanswered, unanswerable. I suspected, deep down, that confrontation would only breed further anguish, more falsehoods, further betrayals. They would invent justifications, excuses, perhaps even attempt to deflect the guilt onto me. I could not endure it. The silence was shattered only by the ceaseless chirping of crickets, a sound that suddenly rasped at my nerves. I crushed the bank statement in my fist, the paper tearing under the force of my despair. The numbers dissolved into an indecipherable mess, a fitting epitaph for the wreckage of my faith. I released my grip, letting the crumpled testament fall to the porch floor. It lay there, discarded, a monument to a shattered dream. I would flee. That much was certain now. Not merely the house, but everything. The memories, the expectations, the faintest flicker of hope that Emily might somehow make amends. I would cut all ties, erase myself from their lives as completely as they had erased my financial security. A nocturnal marauder. That's what she was. That's what they both were. Stealing not only my money, but my serenity, my trust in humankind. And I, the victim, would simply evaporate. A phantom in their lives, forever pricking their conscience, assuming they possessed such a thing. The cold fist of fury that had gripped my heart began to slacken, replaced by a leaden weight of utter disillusionment. The bank statement, a mere slip of paper, bore the crushing burden of years. Faith placed, affection lavished, all seemingly squandered. Confrontation felt like swallowing gravel. I envisioned the scene, their pinched expressions, halting justifications, the predictable blame game. Emily, ever prone to tears. David, the silver-tongued deceiver, weaving tales of hardship and dire necessity. And me, I'd be left with the spectral echo of their fabrications, a residue staining the very air of this home. No, I couldn't stomach their rationalizations, their defenses of the indefensible. Silence, I determined, would be my bulwark. A quiet vanishing from their sphere, a spectre haunting their guilty hearts. I levered myself up, my aging joints creaking in protest. The house felt defiled, corrupted. Each possession, each snapshot, now held a barb. I sought refuge upstairs, in the spare room, a repository for forgotten relics. A weathered duffel bag rested atop the closet shelf, cloaked in dust motes. I hauled it down. Packing became a resolute act, a meticulous severing of ties, clothing, plain and functional. A well-loved edition of Whitman, its pages creased and underscored. My father's timepiece, its ticking a tiny, defiant pulse against the hush. I shunned anything that reeked of Emily, of our shared existence. But then, nestled within a box brimming with bygone correspondence, I discovered it. A photograph. Emily, perhaps 7, her 2 front teeth missing, grinning impishly as she proudly displayed a freshly caught tadpole in a glass jar. My heart twisted. I couldn't excise her completely. I tucked the photograph into the bag. Below, the oppressive quiet intensified. I drifted through the living area, my hand tracing the sofa's spine, the familiar weave comforting beneath my fingertips. The hearth, where we'd whiled away countless evenings, reading, conversing, simply existing. The dining table, etched with the chronicles of family meals, laughter, squabbles, shared nourishment. Each room harbored 1,000 memories, each now a sharp reminder of what was irretrievable. I lingered in the hallway, my gaze drawn to the gallery wall, a visual history of our family spanning decades. Emily's graduation, her wedding day, Christmases long past. I couldn't bring myself to dismantle it. Let them keep it. Let them coexist with the phantoms of our past. My eyes strayed to the framed deed to the property, subtly positioned near the entrance. I had signed it over to them years ago, an act of devotion of ensuring their stability, a naive act, as it transpired. Yet, the lawyer had been astute, bless his cautious mind. He'd insisted on a proviso, a safeguard, granting me the power to reclaim ownership should matters deteriorate. A contingency I'd dismissed as superfluous back then. Now, it was my salvation. The house was, once more, mine, and soon it wouldn't be. One final survey. I stood in the threshold, the duffel bag a weighty presence in my hand. The house seemed to suspend its breath, awaiting my departure, awaiting their return. I closed my eyes briefly, imprinting the image of the house and of my life within its walls onto my memory. Then I pivoted and departed, the silence consuming me entirely. The asphalt ribbon unspooled before the ford, each mile a severing of ties. Not that there were many left to sever. The sun, a molten coin in the rearview mirror, seemed to mock his eastward progress. He didn't have a destination, just a direction away from the hollow shell that had been his life. Away from Emily, from David, from the ghost of what he thought he knew. He gripped the worn steering wheel, the familiar grooves a small comfort. The old truck, a '78 F-150, was the last tangible piece of his past that hadn't been tainted. He'd bought it new, back when his hands were calloused from honest work, not worn smooth by years of signing checks and tending a garden that was no longer his. The highway hummed a monotonous tune, a soundtrack to his fractured thoughts. He saw himself, younger, stronger, hammering the first nail into the frame of that house. Emily, a little girl with pigtails bouncing, handing him tools, her face alight with pride. He'd built it for her, brick by brick, dream by dream. He'd imagined Christmases there, grandchildren running through the yard, a legacy of love etched into the walls. Now, those walls echoed with emptiness, a testament to a love betrayed. He glanced at the fuel gauge, hovering near empty. Didn't matter. He'd pull over when it sputtered its last. He had a few $100s cash, enough for a tank of gas and maybe a motel room. Beyond that, he didn't dare look. A wave of nausea churned in his stomach. He hadn't eaten since yesterday, but food was the furthest thing from his mind. He pulled over onto the shoulder, the gravel crunching under the tires. He killed the engine, the sudden silence amplifying the ringing in his ears. He closed his eyes, the images flooding back. Emily's graduation, her wedding day, the countless small moments that had woven the tapestry of his life, each thread now unraveling, leaving him raw and exposed. Where had he gone wrong? He'd given her everything, more than everything. Maybe. Had he smothered her with his devotion, creating a vacuum she'd filled with David's cold ambition. He opened his eyes, the sun a blinding glare. He couldn't dwell on the whys. They were a bottomless pit, and he was already teetering on the edge. He had to focus on the whats. What was he going to do? Where was he going to go? He reached into the glove compartment, rummaging through old maps and faded receipts. He found a dog-eared road atlas, its pages brittle with age. He flipped through it, his finger tracing the blue lines of the highways. He stopped at a small town in Montana, a speck on the map called Havenwood. The name was ironic, almost cruel, but it was a direction, a possibility. He started the engine, the rumble a defiant growl. He pulled back onto the highway, heading west now, towards the setting sun. The future was a blank canvas, terrifying and exhilarating in its emptiness. He was 73 years old, alone and broke, but he was free, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough to start over. The sign for Whitefish blurred past, a smear of emerald against the encroaching night. My hand tightened on the steering wheel, the leather a stark contrast to my sweating palm. I muttered reassurances about fatigue, about the open road's allure. Yet, an insistent whisper gnawed at the edge of my mind, growing louder with each westward mile. I conjured the house, the familiar complaint of loose floorboards underfoot, the morning sun bathing the kitchen in gold. It was more than just lumber and nails. It was a vault of cherished moments, echoes of laughter and tears, a tapestry woven with holidays and milestones. And they had taken it, not with brute force, but with a subtle, creeping avarice that wounded more deeply than any physical assault. The rearview mirror reflected an endless ribbon of asphalt unspooling behind me. The pickup vibrated beneath me, a steadfast, dependable beast of burden. Fleeing felt absurd, craven. Abruptly, I slammed on the brakes, the tires screaming in protest. I jammed the gear shift into reverse, showering the road with gravel as I spun the truck, aiming its nose back toward Whitefish. The decision felt rash, almost foolhardy, but a nascent resolve began to blossom within me, eclipsing the weariness and despair. The money was secondary, though God knew I desperately needed it. This was about something more fundamental, dominion, not just over the house, but over my very existence. I recalled the stack of documents, buried in a forgotten file cabinet. The deeds, the transfer agreements, the fine print I'd blindly glossed over in a surge of trust. Years ago, I had signed everything away, a token of affection, a safeguard for Emily's future. But the law, I remembered, was a cold, unfeeling arbiter. And I had a hunch, a growing premonition, that those papers held the key to my liberation. I pictured Emily's face, her smooth brow creased in that familiar way when she was denied her desires. And David, his hair plastered back, his unctuous smile, his perpetually extended hand, always expecting, always taking. Anger flickered, a slow, smouldering ember. No, I wouldn't retreat into the shadows, a broken, defeated relic. I would confront them. I would meet their gaze and expose their treachery. And then I would fight for what was rightfully mine. Headlights sliced through the inky blackness, illuminating the path ahead. The engine roared, a defiant challenge. The pickup lunged forward, hurtling me back toward the life I had tried to escape, but this time it wouldn't be on their terms. This time I would be the master of my fate. The Montana sky appeared a touch brighter now, the air carrying a sharper bite. The weight on my chest hadn't vanished completely, but it had eased, softened, yielding to a fragile, nascent hope. It was a beginning, a tentative step toward reclaiming my soul. The shingle outside declared, Thomas Evans, attorney at law. Plain, unpretentious, qualities I prayed mirrored the man within. I needed simplicity and straightforwardness now, someone who'd overlook the map of worry etched on my face and the tremor in my grip, someone who'd simply offer an ear. The waiting area was cramped, motes of dust dancing in shafts of sunlight that pierced the aged blinds. A pile of well-worn periodicals lay on a side table, their covers faded and corners bent. I fought the impulse to grab one. Distraction was a dangerous indulgence. Focus was paramount. Mr. Peterson, a woman, her face radiating kindness, her smile genuine, beckoned. She guided me down a narrow corridor to an office dominated by a large oak desk and towering shelves crammed with legal texts. Thomas Evans stood, offering a welcoming hand. "Please, call me Tom, have a seat." He was younger than anticipated, perhaps in his late 30s, sporting a neatly trimmed beard and projecting an aura of sincere concern. I settled into the leather chair, its surface cool against my back, and placed the manila envelope containing the contents of my safety deposit box on the desk. "Tom, I require your assistance. My circumstances have become dramatically altered." I recounted the ordeal, choosing each word with deliberation, carefully avoiding the raw chasm Emily's departure had created. I spoke of the house, its transfer, the stunning realization of my depleted accounts. I presented the documents, the original deed, the ill-advised power of attorney, and the damning bank statements. Tom listened intently, a slight furrow creasing his brow. He posed pertinent questions, his manner professional yet compassionate. No interruptions, no empty consolations, just an attentive silence. Once I'd finished, he leaned back, his gaze pensive. "This is complex, Mr. Peterson, but far from a lost cause. That power of attorney, it's extensive, yet it lacks the explicit authority to empty your accounts. And the conditions surrounding the property transfer, if you can demonstrate undue influence, manipulation." "Undue influence," I repeated, the legal term seeming inadequate to capture the subtle coercion, the relentless weight of expectation. "It's a legal principle," Tom clarified, "proving they exploited your trust, your vulnerable state, to induce you to act against your own interests." In the bleak landscape of my despair, a fragile bud of hope began to unfold. "So I have a fighting chance," Tom nodded firmly, "a significant one in my estimation, particularly with this documentation. We can file for rescission of the property transfer, place a freeze on their holdings, and launch a thorough investigation into the unauthorized withdrawals." A wave of something akin to defiance washed over me. Not fury, not yet, more a quiet, steely resolution. "Then let's proceed. Let's reclaim what is rightfully mine." The next hour was spent meticulously reviewing the paperwork, Tom elucidating each document, ensuring I grasped the significance of every clause. His approach was thorough, exacting, unhurried. I appreciated his conscientiousness. At last the final document was signed. I watched as Tom applied the official seal, the crisp thud reverberating in the confines of the office. It wasn't a triumph, not yet, but it represented progress, a reassertion of control. As I rose to depart, Tom once again offered his hand. "I understand this is incredibly challenging, Mr. Peterson, but I'm optimistic we can obtain a just outcome for you." "Thank you, Tom," I replied, the words insufficient to convey my gratitude. "For listening, for believing in my case." Stepping outside, the Montana sky seemed somehow more vibrant. The air possessed a newfound clarity. The oppressive weight on my chest hadn't vanished completely, but it had lessened, become slightly more manageable. As I walked toward my truck, a subtle smile touched my lips. The path ahead remained uncertain, yet for the first time in what felt like an eternity, a spark of optimism flickered within, a glimmer that suggested, just perhaps, I could rediscover myself. The taxi departed, abandoning me to the familiar crunch of the driveway gravel. Twilight bled across the heavens in shades of violet and ochre, a melodramatic canvas for my quiet return. I'd kept my visit secret. The less they anticipated, the better for me. On the porch, the fresh locks winked beneath the dim light. Tom's key slid home and turned with a crisp snap. I nudged the door inward. An aroma, sharp with lemon polish and heavy with artificial floral notes, assaulted my senses. Emily's handiwork, undoubtedly. The place, unseen for weeks, felt foreign, disturbingly askew. I pictured their domestic pantomime, suppers at the table, peals of laughter ricocheting where mine had once echoed, or rather used to. My wait wasn't long. Twin beams sliced across the living room window, followed by the grind of tires. A car door thudded shut, then another. In the hall, my pulse hammered, a dull counterpoint to the approaching storm. Emily and David stumbled through the doorway, burdened with shopping. Emily froze, surprise etched on her features, quickly hardening into something far less pleasant. David, always a mirror, reflected her initial shock. Then a frown tugged at his brows. "What in God's name are you doing here?" he barked, dropping a bag with a wet splat. Her jar shattered, releasing shards and a sharp little vinegary tang. "This is my house," I managed, my voice a rusty hinge. I hadn't intended to speak, but the words clawed their way out. "No, it's not. You signed it over." "Remember signing anything away, Dad?" Emily's voice, tight with something akin to panic, rang shrill. She set her load down gingerly. "I changed the locks," I offered, avoiding her gaze. "You can't just waltz in and do that." David advanced, color flooding his face. "We live here. We belong here." "Do you, though?" I finally met Emily's eyes. "Did you imagine I wouldn't notice? The withdrawals? The transfer of ownership?" "Daddy, don't be absurd," Emily cooed, her tone softening, bordering on a plea. "We would never—" "Spare me the daddy," I cut in, years of smothered resentment rising like a toxic tide. "You cleaned out my accounts. You knew exactly what you were doing." "We needed it," David interjected, his voice cracking. "We're building a future." "You're past that. What do you even need it for, anyway?" His words hovered, sharp and cruel. The callousness of the remark stung. "That's not what happened, Dad. You know we would never do anything to hurt you," Emily soothed, throwing David a silencing glare. "We just borrowed it. Intended to pay it back, every penny." "Borrowed?" The word turned to grit on my tongue. "Borrowed without a word. Borrowed everything." "We planned to tell you," Emily insisted, her eyes shimmering with tears that might be genuine. "We just needed a little more time." "Time to vanish," I countered, my voice dead. David lunged forward, fists balled. "Get out of this house, old man, before I throw you out." Emily gasped, appalled. "David, stop it!" I remained motionless, my gaze fixed on David. Let him bluster, let him threaten. I had already lost everything. The silence grew, thick and heavy, broken only by Emily's shallow breaths. I watched the calculations flicker behind her eyes, the desperate attempts to regain control of the unraveling situation. "Hi, Daddy, please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Let's just talk. We can find a solution." I simply regarded her, my expression a blank canvas. There was nothing left to discuss. The fracture was complete. Trust, affection, every bond severed, swept away like dust devils in a desert wind. I turned and retreated down the hall, leaving them standing amidst the wreckage of glass and groceries, their faces a mosaic of fury, dread, and perhaps a flicker of remorse. The last light had drained from the sky, leaving the world awash in grey. I ascended the staircase, each step a small victory hard won. The house belonged to me once more, at least for now. And at this instant, that was enough. "You haven't heard the last of this, old man." David's voice, thick with venom, echoed in the suddenly cavernous hallway. Emily stood beside him, her face a mask of fury I scarcely recognized. "You think you've won?" "This isn't over." I simply stood there, framed in the doorway, a silent sentinel watching my life crumble around me. The house, once a sanctuary of laughter and love, now reverberated with the poisonous echoes of their rage. They stormed out, slamming the door behind them with a force that rattled the windows. The screech of tires on the driveway was their final, brutal punctuation mark. Then, silence. A thick, suffocating silence that pressed down on me, heavier than any physical weight. I walked through the house, room by room, a ghost haunting the scenes of its former life. The air hung stagnant, thick with the residue of their presence, Emily's cloying perfume in the bedroom, David's cheap cologne clinging to the living room drapes. Each scent was a fresh stab of pain. The living room, once a haven of shared evenings and crackling fires, felt sterile and cold. Their furniture, modern and characterless, seemed to mock the room's inherent charm. I ran my hand over the smooth, soulless surface of their coffee table, feeling nothing but emptiness. Upstairs, Emily's room, her childhood room, was a shrine to a stranger. Gone were the posters of pop stars and the overflowing bookshelves. In their place were minimalist decorations, and a carefully curated collection of expensive clothes, all screaming of a life I no longer understood. The bathroom, once filled with the sounds of her girlish laughter and the scent of bubble bath, now smelled faintly of hairspray and regret. I saw her reflection in the mirror, but it was my own weary face staring back, etched with lines of disappointment and loss. Back downstairs, I began. Not with rage, not with tears, but with a quiet determination. I opened windows, letting in the crisp autumn air, chasing out the stale scent of their discontent. I started with the living room, shoving their bland furniture to the center of the room, creating a chaotic island in a sea of potential. Then, I went to the attic. The steep, narrow stairs creaked under my weight as I climbed, each step a small act of defiance. Up there, shrouded in dust and forgotten memories, were my old belongings. The sturdy oak furniture my father had built, the worn leather armchair I'd spent countless hours reading in, the Persian rug my wife had painstakingly chosen. With a grunt of effort, I began to haul them down one piece at a time. The scent of old wood and faded fabric filled the air, a comforting balm to my wounded soul. Each object felt like a familiar friend, a reminder of the life I had built, the life that was still, in some fundamental way, mine. By nightfall, the living room was transformed. My furniture, worn but warm, filled the space with a sense of history and belonging. The Persian rug, its colors muted by time, lay beneath my feet, a silent testament to enduring love. The house still felt empty, but it was an emptiness I could fill, a void I could reclaim. I made myself a simple supper, toast and tea, and sat in my armchair, the familiar weight of it a comforting presence. I picked up a book, a well-worn copy of Dickens, and began to read. The words, familiar and comforting, washed over me, a gentle wave soothing the ache in my heart. Sleep came easily that night, a deep, dreamless sleep. When I woke, the sun was streaming through the windows, casting long shadows across the room. The house still held the echoes of their departure, but it also held the promise of a new beginning. I rose, made myself a cup of coffee, and stood at the window, looking out at the garden. The leaves were turning, painting the landscape in hues of gold and crimson. It was a beautiful sight, a reminder that even in the face of loss, life goes on. And so would I. The silence in the house clung like cobwebs, thick with unsaid words. The familiar weight of the old furniture, however, offered a small anchor, a start. Then the rap at the door. Martha Olson, my neighbor for 2 decades, stood beaming on the porch, a casserole dish radiating savory aromas. "Arthur," she began, her voice a warm balm. "Haven't spotted you around. Figured this might help. Chicken and rice, a little something." I hadn't pegged myself as having a designated something, courtesy of Martha's kitchen. More likely, it was just pure, unadulterated comfort in a dish. "Martha, that's incredibly thoughtful." "Nonsense," she replied, already edging inside. "That's what neighbors are for." She settled the casserole on the counter, her gaze sweeping the room, registering the re-emerged furniture. "You've been busy making it a home again." "Trying," I admitted, the word snagging in my throat. A gentle pat on my arm. "It will. It always does. This house has good bones, Arthur, and layered memories." A pause, her eyes softening with the question. "I heard, well, town's been buzzing, I suppose." "About Emily." I tensed, a familiar wave of shame washing over me. "It's a mess." "Life frequently is," Martha stated, her tone devoid of accusation. "Just remember, Arthur, you're not alone. People care about you here." Opening a cupboard, she unearthed a plate and began serving up a portion. "Eat. You look like you've been burning the candle at both ends." I did as I was told. The chicken and rice, simple and wholesome, provided a much-needed sustenance. The quiet, punctuated only by the soft clink of fork against china, soothed my frayed nerves. The following day, I braved the garden, a wilderness of neglect. Emily had favored pristine order, geometric shrubs, and manicured expanses. I, however, recalled Sarah's sheer delight in this riot of color and fragrance. I started the arduous task of weeding, yanking at tenacious roots, feeling the cool earth between my fingers, My muscles screamed with each bend and stretch, a chorus of protest. Yet, the labor proved strangely restorative, lending a small measure of direction to my day. Later, Martha appeared at the garden's edge, a watering can swinging from her hand. "Need a hand getting this jungle tamed?" she inquired, a grin crinkling the corners of her eyes. I straightened, wiping grime from my forehead. "I could certainly use some assistance. Yes, it's completely run amok." Together, we toiled amongst the unruly vegetation, wrestling weeds, aerating the soil, coaxing new life from the earth. Martha shared amusing stories of gardening mishaps, the perpetually green tomatoes, the precocious roses. I recounted tales of Sarah's champion dahlias, the bountiful vegetable patch that nourished us for years. As we worked side by side, I found myself unburdening myself about Emily. The treachery, the simmering resentment, the profound heartbreak. Martha listened with unwavering patience, offering quiet words of solace and reassurance. She refrained from offering facile solutions, instead granting me the space to vent, to feel acknowledged. "You know," she remarked, as dusk began to paint the sky in hues of orange and violet, casting long shadows across the yard, "Emily's always been driven. Ambitious to a fault. Sometimes those traits overshadow what truly matters." I offered no excuses, there were none. "But that doesn't mean you have to lose sight of what's important, Arthur," Martha continued, her voice a gentle current. "You have a life to reclaim, a garden to nurture, a community that values you." In the subsequent days, I devoted myself to the garden. I planted vibrant blooms, a kaleidoscope of color that Sarah would have adored. I carved out a small vegetable plot, envisioning sun-ripened tomatoes and crisp emerald lettuce. The garden became my refuge, a sanctuary of tranquility and healing. Martha remained a constant presence, bringing sustenance, offering her assistance, simply being there. She mentioned the local book club, the community choir, the upcoming town picnic. She extended no pressure, merely letting me know that I was included. One evening, as we sat on the porch, mesmerized by the ethereal dance of fireflies in the twilight, Martha observed, "You know, Arthur, this town thrives on you. You've always been a solid man, a generous neighbor. Don't let Emily's actions diminish that." Her words resonated, striking a deep chord within me. I had allowed Emily's choices to consume me, to define my existence. I had lost sight of my own identity, my own values. But Martha was right. I refused to surrender my life. "Thank you, Martha," I managed, my voice thick with emotion. "For everything." She smiled, her eyes sparkling in the dim light. "We're neighbors, Arthur. It's what we're here to do." The postman's daily delivery was generally unremarkable. Junk mail, bills, grocery flyers. Today, however, a creamy rectangle, weighty and refined, commandeered the top spot, typed my name and address, but the return offered only a city, Chicago. A tremor visited my hands as I carried it inside. I knew its sender. In the kitchen, the envelope lay on the scrubbed pine like dormant ordnance. Traces of Martha's apple pie, a phantom sweetness in the air, did little to calm me. At last, I lifted it. The paper luxurious beneath weathered fingertips. A hesitant breath, then the tear. Emily's script, tighter and more disciplined than recollection served, plunged in medias res. "Dad," it began, "I'm lost for words, or perhaps strangled by them. What we did was wrong, unconscionably so. No excuse exists, no justification will suffice. I know this. I would understand if you cut me off forever." Then came the explanation, the attempt to explain, their motives. Finances faltered. They felt cornered. The intent wasn't to wound, truly. Repayment was always planned. Down to the last cent once the tide turned. Fabrications disguised as truth, lacquered in regret. Regret, I suspected, at exposure rather than culpability. An apology followed, lengthy and meandering, steeped in self-pity and thinly veiled rationales. She missed me, she penned. Sunday dinners, garden chats, those bygone days. She hoped, somehow, we could mend the fracture. Twice I traversed the letter's landscape, each reading painting a different hue of an emptiness. The long-nursed anger seemed finally spent, leaving an aching void. Was it forgiveness blooming, or merely exhaustion settling in? Perhaps acceptance of a new, unwelcome dawn. The house hummed with a heightened silence. Not the stifling silence of recent months, thick with resentment, but a hushed, reflective quiet. A silence allowing the grandfather clock's measured pulse to penetrate, the soft whisper of leaves against the pane, the steady cadence of my heart. I unearthed stationery from a drawer, a simple cream card graced with a faded floral edge. The pen's familiar heft grounded me. What words could possibly bridge the chasm that now cleaved us? After a moment I began, "Emily," I inscribed, "thank you for your letter. I understand you're navigating difficult waters. I am focusing on healing and wellness now. I hope you find peace. Dad." Concise, impersonal, a deliberate void of emotion. Neither a declaration of war nor an olive branch, simply acknowledgement, closure. I sealed the letter, addressed the envelope, and walked to the mailbox at the lane's end. The setting sun painted the road in gradients of amber and rose, stretching long shadows. The air was sharp, carrying the aroma of damp soil and distant wood smoke. Returning to the house, I poured iced tea and settled onto the porch. The rocking chair, a legacy from Sarah's childhood, chimed with a rhythmic creak as I swayed. A soothing sound, a well-worn comfort. The garden prospered. Martha's hands had coaxed it back, weeding and pruning the neglected beds. Roses flaunted vibrant color, their fragrance a heady intoxicant. Tomatoes swelled on the vine, their skins glistening. The garden, once embodying loss and abandonment, now stood as a testament to resilience, to rebirth. I pictured Emily, the bright, curious sprite she once was. The countless shared hours, stories read, games played, sandcastles sculpted by the shore. Where had that child vanished? What had transformed her into a woman capable of such profound betrayal? The answer eluded me. Perhaps I conceded it was unnecessary. The past remained immutable, unable to be erased. My only recourse, focus on the present, the future, rebuilding my existence, stone by stone. The rocking chair's creak continued, a steadfast rhythm against the twilight's canvas. The silence lingered within, yet no longer pulsed with pain and despair. It resonated with strength, with acceptance, with serenity. A transformed silence, and within it, a nascent glimmer of hope.